So that's all the pistons and rods out. A little bit of wear. Number 1 cylinder piston rings, they're free now, but when I was pulling it out, the top one was seized. It's very tight. 2 and 3 were okay. 4 top sealing ring is completely seized inside the piston. Pistons have got no damage. We've got a bit of wear on the inside of those. That's about the same on all of them. Only on the top bearing on all of them. Let's roll them over. Can't see that much. That one again, about the same. So that's nothing really to worry about. They're all even. If you've got one that's doing that and all the rest clean, then you've got to worry, but they're all quite even. I don't know what the mileage is on the engine. Crank wise, this is just water gubbins, but that zooms in the crank. Probably do with a polish up. That's it, but there's no major play in them. No bits of dirt I've got through from the oil pump onto the crank to do any bad bits of damage. Again, that's just water marks, oil marks. So crank wise, we're looking pretty good. Just get away, probably a polish up, clean all the oil ways out. You can see on that oil way there, got a bit of a blockage or a bubble or something in there. So yeah, not too bad on that. Happy with the crank. I'll pull that out next and have a look. But yeah, so the pistons are out now. Not worried about those. I've replaced all the bearings. I've replaced the conrod studs because they're stretch bolts. Don't reuse them. People probably have, but it's not worth it for the sake of, I know, 100 quid for a set of bolts from VW or ARP versus the bolts coming loose and destroying a whole engine. It's just not worth the cost, really. Some things just make sense to pay out for. Pistons are good nick. Like I say, depending on what can be done with the bore on cylinder 4. Depends on whether these pistons get put back in with a hone or enlarged. Right, so now we need to get the crank out and measure that. But first, I need to get that nut undone, which are tight. So I'll show you a way I do it, which if something slips or goes wrong, it will cause minimum damage. So what you want is a hammer and the socket and a breaker bar. So slide the hammer in, sits there nice and tight, and that is going to be your lever. So if anything goes wrong, you're only going to break a hammer. There you go. Loose, no damage. Obviously that's just your pulley through and hammer, rubber handle. It's not going to cause any damage to anything. So that's a nice, easy and safe way to undo your crank bolt. So now that's off, we've just got to get crank front seal off, a couple of timber bolts, same on the rear, then we can get to all the rest of the bolts, because when the seal's on you can't get a socket around these end nuts, they're too close. So I'll whip those off and get the crank out. Right, so just taking the bolts out. These bolts, they're not stretch bolts, you can reuse them, they're just a 10.9 high tensile bolt. They're only torqued up to 60 or 65 newton meters, so not a lot. And there's no degrees after. If you've got a bolt that's like 65 newton meters and then 90 degrees, that's a stretch bolt. Alright, so these can be reused or just replace them with another 10.9 cap head or something. And when you take these out, get my hand out of the way first. All the big ends are numbered 1 to 5. Make sure the number needs to go relating to the block. So I've got the block upside down now, so the numbers read correctly that way. So make sure they go the numbers on this side and not that side, if that makes sense. So make a space on your table, your desk, or wherever you're putting it. Put them out and put them down in a logical order, so you don't forget how to put it back together. So that's the crank out, and straight away I can see 1 and 2 don't look very pretty. Not 1 and 2 cylinders, but 1 point. So I'm hoping that is just dirt and clean off. I haven't tried to clean it, but you can see there that's where the main oil gallery goes on number 4. Number 4 has got a 360 groove all the way around the cylinder. So yeah, number 1 looks bone dry inside there. But again, that's just wipes off, so there's no problems. And again, there's the other side of that one, just full of grime and rubbish inside there. So hopefully all that will just clean up nicely. So I'll wipe the crank down, and then hopefully that'll be nice and clean. Alright, there's one way to test your oil ways, make sure they're clean. WD-40 or a can. Stick in the holder there, the direction it goes. Nice and clean. Into that one. Oh, not good. Again into the other ones. Simple there. So we've got a blockage in number 3, that big end, that one. The worst is wiped off, but it's going to need a polish. There's nothing marked in it, it's just surface. So again, I've just put some WD-40 on, so I'll let that soak in. It has been sat for a while with rubbish on it, so yeah, that's starting to come off. So I'll just get that measured up. Now these measurements are the same between this crank, as in the 9A engine, and the KR engine. Same bearing, same sizes. So if you haven't got the 9A book, just get Haynes Mark II or Google it. But I'll show you here. So you've got Crankshaft main journal. That's what you're looking for, 54mm. Now I'm just going to measure these with a vernier. Some people call them very nears, but when you're looking at the distances, so you've got 54mm, the next undersize is 0.25, so that's quite a big gap, and even more on the crank pin, which is crank, where the con rod goes. 47.8 is the standard size, and you've got not far off 0.5 mil difference for the next drop down, so you've got large drop downs for the wear. The crank in the 1.9 I took out, bang on those figures. So I'll just use the vernier, make sure they're on 54 and 47.8, as long as they're there, and I'll be happy with that. So I just finished measuring this. So we've got 54mm and all the big ends, perfectly fits on there, even that one, no worries with it. And all the cranks, conrod evens, are all 47.8 bang on, so I'm no worries with this whatsoever. Those will just get a polish up. And if you're worried about, like I showed you in the manual, you've got your differences there. So I've got 54, I'm happy with that. I've dropped this vernier down to 53.75, or as close to as I can by eye on there. And just to confirm, like that won't fit over there. And so you've only got the option of a standard sizing. So they're all within tolerance. So much happy with that. You can go for the effort of using the plastic gauges, all that sort of stuff, but VW cranks are very good. Nothing to worry about really, so just needs polish. I'll get some wet and dry and just rub those two down just to double check I'm happy with them. But again, that'll just get a polish up, clean the oils out, and that can go back in when it gets built up finally anyway. So that is the crank, happy with. Again, block wise. Now, all the upper bearings have the recesses in them. It's only that one that has a 360 recess. Can't remember why, they just do. So, no worries with those. Again, I'll just clean the oils out, clean all the gunk out, and then that can be ready. Yeah, so don't look too bad in there, apart from the old number 4, which needs reboring. Right, so what I've done there, this is a little sort of tip to work out what sort of damage you've got depth-wise. So I've just coloured in, this is the problem area, that line there, and a little bit on the other side. So I just coloured all the top of the ball, permanent marker, all the way around to see what we've got. And what we'll do then, get a bit of 320 grit sandpaper on a thin cylinder, a bit of wood, just rub it around gently. And then once all that permanent marker's gone, what you should be left with Ideally nothing, but you'll see your lowest points. So I'll get that done now and you'll see. So this is my makeshift tool I was using for the bore. Just a bit of sandpaper. I didn't have a wooden box, so extension bar. Just rub it around the inside like that. Nice bit of pressure on there. And all that's doing is taking the permanent marker off and leaving the indents in there. So you see all those darker points. That's the permanent marker still on there because it hasn't gone over. So that just confirms 100% it's going to need a bore out. How much? I've only got the option of really half a mil ideally. If not, it'll go to a mil. Ideally not a millimetre because then you're limited on the head gaskets with the thickness of the firing ring gap in there. But when it comes to the point, I'll get that bored out and then they'll do a half a mil. If it goes clear, then it's fine. If not, then they'll do a mil. So that's not a worry about that. So next job will be getting the auxiliary shaft out. I'll do that another day. Measure it while it's in the best I can, get it out, and I'll do a talk for on the bearings because you can get wear on the bearings and there's quite a simple reason why they do. So that's all comes apart quite easily. Not hard engines to take apart. Again, put things down in a logical place. I've taken the crank out. I've got 1 to 5. Got the upper bearings 1 to 5. Front, rear crank seals. Simple things like that. Pistons don't matter too much unless you're going to strip back in, but those rods will be balanced anyway. So it doesn't matter which way they go at the moment. Once I finish them, there will be plus or minus a couple of grams ready to go back in with some bigger pistons. So, and then looking forward to getting onto that head. That looks disgusting at the moment, but just some rusty stuff. And again, if you're going to leave a crank out, get anything on it, some kind of oil, just to cover the surfaces, just to protect it so it doesn't get any pitting on there from the rust. So as you can see, those two are cleaned up quite well. There are still little marks on there, nothing major, little, you can just feel it with your fingernail. That's just where it's been sat again. It's the worst on the bottom part, and again the bottom part on there where obviously the engine's been sat. So all it will do is when they go to the machine shop, they'll get polished up first. Obviously they all measure up now how they should be within tolerance, but once they're polished they'll obviously drop down. So the machine shop will have the information of what bearings are available for this, or I can give them the copy out of the book or whatnot. So once they've polished them down, they'll then measure them all up and make sure all of the bearings for the mains are the same size. So we could end up going one size under just because those two need polishing, but we'll come to that when we come to it. But nothing catastrophic. So that's all those cleaned up, so that's good. I did give the block a bit of a degrease as well, just the worst of it. All the mess down there, a couple of toothbrushes and some oven cleaner. Clean that all off. You'll need another going over, but just enough to start taking things apart. I'll give it another good degreasing once the auxiliary shaft's out, and I'm ready to put everything back in as a sort of transport mode until I'm ready to get things built up properly. So any questions, stick them in the comments. Good feedback so far on this engine, so that's pretty cool. So yeah, thanks for watching. Cheers.